We are continuing our study in the Gospel of Matthew. We have been looking at the temptations of Jesus. We are going to continue a large scale view of Matthew chapter 4 and verses 1 to 11. If you need an example of the text, you can refer to the previous video. It includes the King James Version of this passage. Matthew chapter 4 and verses 1 to 11. We are talking about leadership now. We looked at some of the pitfalls of leadership in the last one. Now we're going to move to what it means experientially to be a leader in the context of Christian leadership. I'm not trying to in any way speak of leadership in the wider business, commercial, secular world. I'm talking about what does it mean to be a leader as modeled by Jesus and as he is our example for leadership in a Christian context. In a word, leadership in the church is lonely. When that is said, that can be misinterpreted. To say leadership in the church is lonely is not to say that leadership means leaders can be lone rangers. The temptations of Jesus were not a statement that Jesus could and would not work with people. The temptations were not a group activity. It was something that Jesus had to experience and go through alone. In reality, though, he was not alone, for God the Spirit was with him. So to say leadership is lonely is not to say we do it apart from God at work through us. In and through this experience, Jesus was ultimately seeing what he was made of. Leadership is lonely, for it is leadership. You ever notice that the root word in leadership is lead? How do you lead? To be simple, we could say you lead by going ahead of people. Notice that before Jesus called disciples and established leaders and leadership in his movement, he, that is Jesus, was being tempted. Before there was a Peter or a Nathaniel, there was Jesus being tempted. You see, before he asked the men and women who were to be his followers to follow, he had worked through the issues in ministry and in leadership. You see, Jesus did not ask of these people things that he himself had not gone through. Now, notice that in the last sentence, that is not to say that the people saw that. In the military, and I'm thinking especially in the pre-modern era, scouts were important. These were the people in the military who were out beyond the forces to get an idea where the enemy was. An effective scout would be the one who could give your forces an advantage. Armies often use tactics to deceive. So a troop movement might give the sense that the attack will be over there, when in the reality is the bulk of the troops are on another part of the front line. Or the cavalry could be held back, so a flanking movement could happen after the battle starts. If you were to pour all your troops on the front line in a particular place, you could find the enemy's cavalry coming around the end of your line or your flank. Scouts have the ability to give valuable information because they have been out front. They know what the enemy is up to, and this is not always a secure position. Christian leadership is about being up front. It is about being aware of what people will deal with and what the church must be ready for. Christian leaders are the ones who have grappled with these issues in prayer. They are the ones who have endured the spiritual struggle. It is unfortunate but too often leadership is not about leading. And we are talking in the church, but this principle is true in much of life. The leadership is a call, can be a call for consensus. So, for example, Peter, do you think I should bow down and worship him? After all, it would make our job easier. Or leadership can become about minimizing risk. Andrew, go get some bread before I start thinking about eating those rocks before me. Or leadership can be about showmanship. Thaddeus and Judas, not the one called Iscariot. You will be in charge of crowd control when I jump off the temple. Leadership in the church is ultimately about people who have encountered God and through the ensuing struggle grappled what God wants to do through them and then what God wants to do through them in the life of the church.